People think an old man's life becomes quiet with age, that things slow down, that nothing unexpected happens anymore. But the truth is, some of the hardest lessons come when you least expect them. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 74 years old, and I've lived long enough to see everything I built disappear in ways I never imagined. I wasn't always this quiet man people see today. There was a time when my house was full. Laughter, noise, arguments over dinner. The kind of life that feels ordinary while you're living it, but becomes priceless once it's gone. I worked most of my life with my hands. Construction, long days, early mornings. I wasn't rich, but I made sure my family never needed anything. My wife, she was the heart of everything. Kept the house together, kept me grounded. And my son, he was my pride. Strong, smart, better than I ever was. I remember thinking, he'll have a life easier than mine. That was all I ever wanted. Before I go further, tell me where you're listening from. I always wonder how far stories like mine travel. And if you've lived long enough to lose something that once meant everything, you'll understand what I'm about to say next. Because everything changed the day I lost him. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. No warning. No time to prepare. One day he was there, and the next, he was gone. A father should never outlive his son. There's something unnatural about it. Something that never sits right, no matter how much time passes. The house became quiet after that. Too quiet. His room stayed the same for months. I couldn't bring myself to change anything. His shoes still by the door. His jacket still hanging where he left it. Like he might walk in any moment. But he never did. And that's when everything else slowly began to change. Not all at once, but little by little, until I started to realize the family I thought I still had wasn't really there anymore. After my son passed, I told myself one thing. I still had a family. His wife, my grandchildren. That had to mean something. At least, that's what I believed. In the beginning, they came often, almost every week. The house wasn't as quiet anymore. Voices in the living room, footsteps in the hallway. For a while, it felt like maybe things would be okay. But then I started noticing something. A pattern. They never came empty-handed, but they never came empty-hearted either. Every visit had a reason. Grandpa, I need help with something. Dad left some things unfinished. Bills are piling up. At first, I didn't think twice. Of course I helped. What else was I supposed to do? They were my family, my son's children. His responsibility had become mine. Or at least, that's how I saw it. So I gave. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. School fees, car repairs, unexpected expenses. Each time they promised, it's just for now. We'll manage soon. And I believe them. Because when you're older, you don't hold on to money the same way. You hold on to people. But slowly, something started to feel off. They stayed shorter each time, left quicker. Conversations became lighter, not deeper, not meaningful, just enough to get through the visit. And then, back to the same request. More money, more help, more just this once. Even my daughter-in-law, she rarely spoke unless it was necessary. Polite, but distant, like she was tolerating me, not respecting me. I remember one evening clearly. They had come over again, sat down, smiled, and within 10 minutes, the conversation turned. Things are tight right now. I nodded slowly, already knowing where it was going. That's when it hit me. Not fully, but enough. I wasn't being visited. I was being accessed. Like a place. like a resource, not like a person. Still, I said nothing, because a part of me hoped. I was wrong. But deep down, I wasn't. And what happened next removed every doubt I had left. The day I stopped giving them money was the day everything became clear. It wasn't planned. I didn't sit down and decide anything. I just reached a point. They came over like they always did. Same routine, same smiles, same small talk. And then, right on time, my daughter-in-law said, "We're a little short this month." I looked at her, then at my grandchildren, and for the first time, I didn't respond immediately. I just sat there, quiet, thinking, because something inside me had changed. Not anger, not yet, just clarity. "I can't help this time," I said calmly. The room went silent. Not the usual kind of silence. This one felt different, heavy, unexpected. My grandson frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" I said, "I won't be giving any money today. No explanation. No excuses. Just truth." My daughter-in-law's expression changed instantly. The politeness disappeared, replaced by something sharper. "Are you serious?" she asked. Yes, that one word did more than anything I had ever said before, because it broke the pattern. And people don't react well when patterns break. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms. "Well, that's surprising." Surprising. As if I had failed an obligation. As if helping them wasn't a choice, but a responsibility. I stayed calm. "I've helped a lot already," I said quietly. My grandson spoke again. "But we need it." I nodded. "I understand. But I won't be able to help this time." Another silence. But this time, there was no pretending. No warmth. No family feeling. Just tension. Then my daughter-in-law said something that changed everything. Something that finally confirmed what I had been feeling for months. She looked at me, straight in the eye, and said, "Well, if you're not going to help us, I don't see the point of coming here anymore." There it was. Clear, simple, honest. Not a relationship, a transaction. And the moment the transaction ended, so did everything else. I didn't respond, didn't argue, because there was nothing left to understand. They stood up, collected their things, and walked out. No goodbye, no hesitation. Just like that, the house was quiet again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty, clear, because now I knew the truth. They were never coming for me. They were coming for what I could give. And without it, I meant nothing. But what they did next went further than I ever expected. They didn't come back the next week, or the week after that. At first, I told myself they just needed time. Maybe things had gotten busy. Maybe I had overthought everything. But deep down, I already knew. The phone stopped ringing. Messages became shorter, then disappeared completely. Just like that, I went from being needed to being forgotten. The house felt quieter than ever. Not the kind of silence you get used to, the kind that reminds you something is missing. Days turned into weeks. No visits, no calls, nothing. I started noticing small things. Birthdays passed without a message. Even my grandson, who used to call me Grandpa with excitement, didn't reach out once. That hurt more than anything else. Because children don't fake feelings. They reflect what they're taught. And that told me everything I needed to know. Still, I said nothing, did nothing, just watched. Because sometimes, silence reveals more than questions ever could. Then, one afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, It was my daughter-in-law, standing there alone. No kids, no warmth, just purpose. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her tone wasn't soft. It wasn't emotional. It was direct. I stepped aside. She walked in without hesitation. Didn't sit. Didn't look around. Got straight to the point. "We've been talking," she said. I nodded slowly. "Waiting. We think it's better if you move out." For a moment, I didn't react. Not because I didn't hear her, but because I wanted to make sure I understood correctly. "Move out?" I repeated. She nodded. "This house? It would be more useful for us." Useful. That word again. I looked at her, carefully. "This is my house," I said calmly. She didn't hesitate. It was my husband's too. There it was. The justification. The shift. From request to claim. "And now he's gone," she added. "We need stability." I stayed quiet for a moment, then asked, "So your solution is to remove me?" She crossed her arms. "We're not removing you. We're just saying it makes more sense this way." Makes more sense. I almost smiled, because people always find ways to make selfish decisions sound reasonable. "I'm not leaving," I said simply. Her expression hardened. "Then we'll have to handle this differently." That sentence wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control. And they were willing to go further than I thought. Much further. What happened after that conversation is something I never expected from my own family. I didn't argue with her, didn't raise my voice, didn't try to convince her of anything. At my age, you learn something most people don't. When someone shows you who they are, you believe them. So I looked at her and said calmly, "I'm not leaving my house." She held my gaze for a few seconds, then gave a short nod. "All right," she said. "We'll deal with it properly then." Properly. Another word people use when they've already made a decision. She turned and walked out. No emotion. No hesitation. Just purpose. The door closed behind her, and something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not fear. Just understanding. Because now it was clear this wasn't going to end quietly. 2 days later, I found out what she meant. I came home from a short walk, and my key didn't work. At first, I thought I had made a mistake. Tried again. Same result. That's when I noticed it. The lock had been changed. I stood there for a moment, looking at my own door, like it belonged to someone else. Then I knocked. Hard. After a few seconds, the door opened. My grandson stood there. Didn't smile. Didn't say "Grandpa." Just looked at me. Confused? Uncomfortable. "Where's your mother?" I asked. He stepped aside. She came into view. Calm. Composed. Like nothing unusual had happened. "You changed the locks," I said. Not a question. A fact. She nodded. "Yes." I waited. Just for a second. Expecting. Something. An explanation. A reason. But there was nothing. So I asked, "You're serious about this?" Her answer came without hesitation. "We need this house." I looked past her. Inside my own home. My furniture. My memories. Everything still there, but suddenly not mine. "And me?" I asked quietly. She shrugged slightly. "You'll figure something out." That sentence was colder than anything she had said before, because it wasn't anger. It was dismissal. Complete. Final. I stood there for a moment longer, then nodded. Slowly. Not because I agreed, because I understood. They had made their choice. And now, so would I. I turned around, walked back to my old truck, sat inside for a long time without starting the engine, because when your own family shuts the door on you, there's a moment where everything becomes very clear. And in that moment, I realized something they didn't. They thought they had taken everything from me, but they had no idea what I was actually holding on to. I didn't go back to that house. Not that day. Not the next. Because once a door is closed like that, you don't stand there knocking. You walk away. I drove for a while. No destination. Just moving. Thinking. Because what had just happened wasn't just betrayal. It was final. They didn't just stop caring. They replaced me. Like I was something that could be moved aside. Disposed of. And the worst part? They believed they had won. That thought stayed with me. Not in anger. In clarity. By the time the sun went down, I had made my decision. I pulled into a small motel on the edge of town. Nothing special. Just a place to sit, to think, to plan. Because that's what people don't expect from old men. Planning. They think we just accept things. Move on quietly. They're wrong. That night, I opened something I hadn't touched in years. A file. Kept safely. Away from everything. Inside it, documents. Records. Proof of something no one in my family knew. Not my daughter-in-law. Not even my grandchildren. My son knew, but he never told them. And after he passed, that secret stayed with me until now. I sat there on that motel bed, reading through those papers again, slowly, carefully, because what I was looking at wasn't just money. It was control, ownership, power over $10 million worth of assets, investments, properties, accounts built quietly over decades. Not flashy, not obvious, but real, very real, and completely untouched, because I never needed to show it. I lived simply by choice, not by limitation. And now, for the first time in years, I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I understood something they didn't. They thought they had removed me from their lives. But in reality, they had just removed themselves from mine. And more importantly, they had no idea what they had just lost access to. I closed the file, set it beside me, and leaned back, because the next step wasn't going to be emotional. It wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be precise. Because revenge, done right, doesn't need noise. It just needs timing. And mine was just beginning. The next morning, I didn't call them, didn't message, didn't go back, because people expect noise after conflict. They expect anger, begging, arguments. I gave them none of that. Instead, I got to work. The first call I made was to my lawyer. Not the kind you call for small matters. The kind you call when you're about to change everything. Mr. Hayes, he said, surprised to hear from me. I need to review all my assets, I told him, and make some changes. There was a pause. Then his tone shifted. Of course. How soon? Today, by noon, I was sitting across from him. Clean office. Quiet room. No emotions. Just business. I placed the file on his desk. He opened it, and even he raised his eyebrows slightly. It's been a while since I've seen this, he said. Yes, I replied. And it's time it stops being quiet. We went through everything. Accounts, investments, properties, every detail, carefully, because this wasn't just about protecting what I had. It was about deciding where it would go. Do you want to transfer anything? He asked. I nodded. Yes. Family? he asked. I looked at him, then said, no. That one word felt different. Not heavy, not painful, clear, because family isn't just blood. It's behavior. And they had shown me theirs. So I started making decisions, precise ones, a portion to charity, a portion to long-term funds, and the rest structured in a way that made one thing very clear. No one could touch it. No one could pressure me again. No one could assume anything. When we finished, he looked at me and asked, do they know about any of this? I shook my head. No. He gave a small nod. Ben, they're going to be surprised. I almost smiled. Not yet, I said. But they will be, because this wasn't about revealing everything immediately. It was about timing. The right moment. The right impact. The right message. By the time I left that office, everything was in place. Protected, controlled, and completely out of their reach. That evening, I checked into a better place. Not expensive, just comfortable, because I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not to them, not to anyone. I was simply taking back control of my own life. But what I didn't expect was how quickly things would change on their side. Because just 1 week later, they came looking for me. And this time, they weren't asking. They were desperate. It took them exactly 8 days. 8 days of silence before they realized something was wrong. At first, I imagined they were comfortable, living in the house, using everything like it already belonged to them. No pressure, no interruptions. But comfort doesn't last long when reality starts catching up, because the house wasn't just walls and furniture. There were bills, taxes, utilities, things my son used to handle, things I had quietly taken care of after he passed. And now, those responsibilities had nowhere to go. I found out later how it started. A notice, then another, payments overdue, accounts needing attention, things they had never thought about because they never had to. By the 5th day, the pressure had already begun. By the 7th, it was panic. And on the 8th day, there was a knock on my door. This time, I was ready. I opened it slowly. My daughter-in-law stood there. But she wasn't the same person who had closed the door on me. No confidence. No control. Just tension. Behind her, my grandchildren. Quiet. Uneasy. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice had changed. Softer. Careful. I stepped aside. Let them in. They walked in slowly, looking around like they weren't sure where they stood anymore. We sat down. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then she finally said, "We didn't realize how much you were handling." I nodded. "I know." She looked down at her hands. "We're having some issues. Issues. A simple word for a complicated problem." I stayed quiet. Let her continue. "The house. The expenses. Things are adding up." Of course they were. "That's not all," she added. Her voice tightened. "There are some financial problems Daniel left behind. That got my attention. Not surprise. Confirmation. Because desperation always has a deeper reason. And you thought the land would fix it," I said. She didn't deny it. Just nodded slowly. Yes. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Honest. Then she looked up at me, eyes tired now. Not proud. Not distant. Just real. "We need your help." There it was. Not demand. Not expectation. A request. But it came late. Too late to be simple. I leaned back slightly, studied her face, then looked at my grandchildren. Quiet, watching, learning. Because moments like this stay with people and shape who they become. What kind of help? I asked. She hesitated, then said, "We can't manage the house like this." Of course they couldn't. It was never theirs to manage. Then she added something else, something I had been waiting to hear. "We made a mistake." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "You did." And for the first time, there was no argument, no defense, just silence. Because now, they were finally facing the truth. But what they didn't know yet was that I had already made my decision, and it wasn't the one they were hoping for. I didn't answer them right away, not because I didn't have one, because I wanted them to sit in that moment, to feel it, the weight of what they had done, the distance they had created, because some lessons don't come from words, they come from silence. My daughter-in-law finally spoke again. "Please, we just need some support until we figure things out." Support. A softer word this time, carefully chosen. I looked at her, then at the kids, and asked quietly, "Support or control?" She froze. Didn't expect that, because the difference matters. A lot. "We're not trying to take anything," she said quickly. I didn't respond, just held her gaze. And after a few seconds, she looked away. That told me everything. I leaned forward slightly. "You didn't just ask me to leave," I said. "You locked me out of my own home." Her voice dropped. "I know. You didn't just stop visiting," I continued. "You stopped treating me like family." Silence. No denial. No excuses. Just truth sitting in the room. Then I said something simple. "And now you're here because things are difficult." She nodded slowly. Yes, at least that part was honest. I leaned back, took a slow breath, because this was the moment, the one that defines everything after. "I'm not coming back to that house," I said. Her head lifted quickly. "What?" "I won't live there again," I repeated calmly. Confusion spread across her face. "But it's your home." "No," I said quietly. It was. That sentence changed the room, because they expected me to fight for it, to demand it back, to return. But I didn't, and that made them uneasy. Because now, they didn't understand me anymore. "What does that mean for us?" she asked carefully. There it was, the real question. Not about me, about them. I looked at her for a long moment, then said, "It means you'll have to decide what kind of people you want to be, without depending on me." Her eyes filled slightly. "That's not what we want." I nodded. "I know, but it's what you created." Silence again, longer this time. Then my grandson spoke, quietly. "Grandpa, are you mad at us?" I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time since all this started, something softened inside me. "No," I said gently. "I'm not mad." He frowned. "Then why won't you help?" That question was the hardest one, because it came without manipulation, without intention, just honesty. I took a breath, then answered, "Because helping you the same way again would only teach you nothing has to change." The room went still, because that wasn't what they expected. Not rejection, not anger, something harder, responsibility. And that's when I told them what I had decided, a decision they would never forget. I stood up slowly, walked to the window, looked outside for a moment before turning back, because what I was about to say wasn't easy, but it was necessary. "I will help you," I said. Relief hit their faces instantly, too quickly. That's when I added, "But not the way you think." The relief faded, replaced by confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. I walked back and sat down, calm, steady. "I'm not giving you money," I said. Her expression tightened. I'm not paying your bills. Now tension. I'm not fixing the situation you created. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then, how are you helping us? She asked quietly. I looked at her, then at the kids, then said, by giving you a chance to change. She frowned slightly. I don't understand. I know, I said. That's why this matters. I leaned forward slightly. You're going to take responsibility for everything, I continued. The house, the expenses, the problems. Her eyes widened. We can't do that alone. You already are, I said calmly. You just don't like it. That stopped her. Because it was true. Then I continued, I will guide you, advise you, help you make decisions. Hope returned just a little. But you will fix it yourselves. And just like that, it dropped again. Because this wasn't rescue. This was accountability. What if we fail? She asked. I looked at her, then answered simply. Then you learn. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it was different. Not resistance. Not anger. Thinking. Real thinking. Because for the first time, they were being asked to face their own situation. Without shortcuts. Without someone stepping in to carry it. My grandson looked at me again. So you're not leaving us? I gave a small nod. I'm not leaving you, I said. Just not carrying you. That line stayed in the room. Heavy, clear, and slowly, something shifted. Not fully, not completely, but enough. My daughter-in-law took a deep breath, then nodded. We'll try. Not confident, not strong, but honest. And that was enough. For now. Because change doesn't happen in one moment. It starts there, then builds, slowly, over time. I stood up, walked them to the door, and before they left, I said one last thing. Tomorrow morning, you start fixing things. She nodded again. Then they walked out, quieter than before, but different. And as I closed the door, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. This was something much harder, because anyone can walk away. But staying and forcing people to become better, that takes something else. Still, there was one thing they didn't know yet. Something I hadn't told them. Not about the house, not about the past, but about me. And when they finally found out, it would change everything all over again. The next few days were different. Not easier, but different. They didn't call me for money, didn't ask for anything. For the first time, they were quiet, and that told me something had finally started to sink in. On the third day, my daughter-in-law called. Her tone wasn't rushed this time. It wasn't demanding either. It was careful. We've started going through the bills, she said. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Good. A pause. Then, it's worse than we thought. Of course it was. Problems always look smaller from the outside. What have you figured out so far? I asked. And for the first time, she explained things. Clearly. Honestly. Expenses. Debts. Things she didn't understand before. Now she was trying to. And I listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't judge. Because this was the part they had avoided for so long. Responsibility. Over the next week, they called a few more times. Short conversations. Focused. No manipulation. No pressure. Just questions. And slowly, they started making progress. Small steps, but real ones. Cutting unnecessary costs. Sorting payments. Understanding what needed to be done. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Then one afternoon, she said something that caught my attention. We're thinking of selling part of the land. I went quiet. Because now we were back at the beginning. Why? I asked. To cover the pressure, she said. Just a portion. Reasonable. Logical. But still incomplete. Do you understand its value? I asked. There was a pause. Not completely, she admitted. I know, I said. Because they never had. Not really. That land wasn't just money. It was time, history, patience. But more importantly, it was never their solution. It was their shortcut. And shortcuts are what got them here. Don't sell anything yet, I told her. Then what do we do? She asked. I took a breath, because this was the moment, the one I had been waiting for. You need to understand something first, I said. What? Everything you're dealing with right now isn't your biggest problem. Silence. Confusion. Then she asked, What do you mean? I leaned back in my chair, and for the first time, I decided to open the door. Just a little. It means, I said calmly, you've been worrying about the wrong numbers. Another pause. Longer this time. What numbers should we be worried about? She asked quietly. I let that question sit for a second, then answered, the ones you don't even know exist. And just like that, the direction of everything changed. Because now, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something much bigger, something they had never even considered. And when they finally understood it, it wouldn't just surprise them. It would shock them completely. 2 days later, I asked them to come see me. Not at the house, not at their place, somewhere neutral, quiet, because what I was about to show them needed space. They arrived together. No tension this time, no attitude, just uncertainty. We sat down. No small talk, no delays. I looked at both of them, then placed a folder on the table, the same one I had opened in that motel room. My daughter-in-law glanced at it, then at me. What is this? She asked. Open it, I said. She hesitated for a second, and slowly reached forward. As she flipped the first page, her expression changed. Not fully, just a slight shift. Then the second page, then the third. And that's when it hit her. Her hands stopped moving. She looked up at me, confused, then back at the papers, then again at me. What is this? She asked again. Her voice wasn't steady this time. Keep reading, I said. She did. Slower now, carefully, like she wasn't sure what she was looking at. My grandson leaned in slightly, trying to understand. And then she saw the number. Clear, undeniable. Her eyes widened. Her breathing changed. No, she whispered. I said nothing, just watched. Because some truths don't need explanation. They're yours? She asked. I nodded once. Yes. Silence. Complete. Heavy. Because in that moment, everything they thought they knew about me collapsed. All at once. But how? She asked. I leaned back slightly. Over time, I said. Work. Decisions. Patience. She shook her head slowly. You have all of this? Yes. And you never said anything? I looked at her. Calm. Why would I? That question stayed in the air. Because now she understood something painful. They didn't ignore a poor old man. They ignored a man who had everything and chose to live simply. Her voice dropped. We had no idea. I know, I said, because that was the point. Silence again. Long, uncomfortable. Then she asked the question I had been waiting for. You could have fixed everything. From the start, I nodded slowly. Yes, and you didn't? No, that one word hit harder than the number she had just seen. Because now, it wasn't about money. It was about choice. She looked down at the papers again, then back at me, eyes filled with something new. Not just shock, regret, deep, real. And that's when I told her the truth she needed to hear. The one that would stay with her forever. Money doesn't fix people, I said quietly. It reveals them, and everything after that moment was going to prove exactly that. No one spoke for a while after that. Not my daughter-in-law, not the kids, just silence, and the weight of everything settling in. She slowly closed the file. We didn't know, she said quietly. I know, I replied. She hesitated, then said, we treated you like you didn't matter. I looked at her calmly. You treated me exactly how you chose to. Her eyes dropped. I thought you had nothing, she admitted. And when you thought that, I asked, what did I become? She whispered, replaceable. That word said everything. My grandson spoke softly. We didn't mean to hurt you. I looked at him. I know, but you still did. Silence again. Then she asked, what happens now? I leaned back slightly. I'm not taking the house back. She looked up surprised. You're not? No. Confusion crossed her face. But it's yours. Yes, I said. And I'm choosing to let you keep it. Why? She asked. Because losing a home doesn't teach you what you need, I said. But keeping it, with responsibility, does. She nodded slowly. And the money? She asked carefully. That stays where it is, I replied. No access. Not now. Not later. Her expression fell. I'm not fixing your mistakes, I said calmly. But I am giving you a chance to become better. Tears rolled down her face. We don't deserve that, she whispered. You're right, I said. Silence. Then I added, but you can earn it. That changed everything. Because now it wasn't about money. It was about responsibility. We stood up, and before leaving, I looked at them one last time. Not with anger, not with disappointment, just clarity. Because in the end, this was never about $10 million. It was about knowing who stands with you when they think you have nothing. And now, I finally had my answer. 3 months later, things were different. Not perfect, but different. The house was still theirs, but it didn't feel the same anymore. Because now, they understood what it actually took to keep it. Bills were paid on time. Expenses were controlled. And for the first time, they weren't calling me for money. They were calling me for advice. Short calls. Simple questions. Real effort. One evening, my grandson came to see me alone. No hesitation this time. No discomfort. Just honesty. Grandpa, he said, we're doing better. I nodded. I know. He smiled slightly. Not the same smile as before. This one had respect in it. We didn't understand before, he added. I know, I said again. Because that's the thing about life. Understanding usually comes after the damage. A few days later, my daughter-in-law came too. She didn't sit right away, just stood there for a moment. I wanted to say something, she said. I waited. I was wrong. No excuses. No explanations. Just that. And for the first time, it felt real. Not because she said it, but because she had lived through the consequences. I'm not asking for anything, she added. I just wanted you to know that. I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. That's enough, because sometimes accountability is more valuable than apology. Before she left, she paused at the door. You could have walked away, she said. Yes, I replied. But I didn't. She nodded slowly, then left. And as the door closed, I sat there in silence, not heavy this time, peaceful, because in the end, I didn't lose my family. I just saw them clearly. And sometimes, that's more valuable than anything money could ever give you.